Negative stereotypes and perceptions of student athletes still persist in institutions of education. Whether it is the staff, peers, or general public, to this day these are often intensified in black college athletes, as issues of race and racism are still deeply present in our culture. As Engstrom stated, dating back to 1991, he discussed how many myths and stereotypes exist surrounding the student athlete on campus. These have a wide range spanning from being a campus hero to being a dumb jock. He comments that the dumb jock portrayal has been even more prevalent for the black student athlete. Athletes often have a negative stigma automatically associated with them, as if they do not care about school, as if the only thing on our minds at all times is the sport we play. On top of that, being an African American male athlete does not help with the negative stereotypes already surrounding us. I have witnessed and experienced these firsthand. In high school, I had an engineering teacher, and I was one of the only athletes in the program, and the only black student, and we never saw eye to eye. I could never really understand this, and why he was so hard on me and always singling me out. I was in his class for 3 years, and finally my senior year, I burst. There would be days when I would walk in his class 30 seconds late, but not because I was waking up late or was being lazy, but because I was waking up at 5 a.m. to go work out, and he knew this. There would be students walking in way later than me, but it seemed like I was always catching the most opposition. He started calling my mom, talking to principals, doing whatever he could to get me into some sort of trouble. My work was in, my grades were good. On my last day in his class, I let all that tension that was building inside of me out. I let him know how I felt by calling him a dick and leaving the room. Something that I thought was not that big of an insult landed me an in-school suspension on the last week of school when I didn't even need to be there. I let him bait me into being the dumb jock that he portrayed me to be. People see you as one thing. I am 6'7", so the first thing out of people's mouths is, do you play basketball? I will forever be tied to athletics, but I am not defined by the sport I play. Today I will be discussing the perceptions of collegiate student athletes and compounded racial impact. An article by Knapp in 2001 surveyed over 1,000 college students at the University of Nevada. He found that most of the time they were supportive of college athletes and athletics, but questioned the academic seriousness of the athletes and didn't feel that sweeping reform was needed. He did admit, though, that their university may not have been a representative of all American universities, and it was reasonable to hypothesize that this could be representative of other universities. At school, it is common for other students to come up to me and say the game was fun to watch or you did good, but when asking me about my major or what my goals were, they seemed to be shocked that I took 4 years of engineering in high school and 2 years of AP English, and I am majoring in computers. The look on their faces is of shock and confusion, as if the only thing they think I can do is play basketball. They don't know that my parents have always been serious about academics, and they both have master's degrees. Basketball was never the only goal. I often wonder how my professors see me. Do they think that I am just here to play ball? I feel like I am constantly having to prove myself. Engstrom in 1991 examined the prejudice towards university student athletes. He discusses that years of myths and stereotypes about athletes have existed, and often they are not even educated on all the isms that they may face or how to combat them. He discusses that college athletes are often juggling not only a tough practice and game schedule, but as well as the stresses and strains of regular day-to-day classes and grades. He discusses how these factors all together and the stress it can create is often overlooked on all levels. As a college basketball player, I am very familiar with the difficulties that it creates. Not only do we have the same stress and strain as a regular student, which is already hard enough, we have 1, 2, maybe even 3 workouts a day. And when in season, we can be on the road until 1 or 2 a.m., having to wake up at 7 the next day and get ready for class. This strain almost made me cave in. Before winter break last year, I hit rock bottom because I was overwhelmed with not playing well on top of getting through my first college semester and finals. I had been away from my sisters and my parents for 5 months. Because I am from Cleveland, I didn't get to see them often, which I had never experienced before, and it was not like I could just up and leave at any given time. My first semester nearly broke me, but in the end it made me much tougher. Then with the pandemic, not having the rigid schedule posed its own challenges. Both Engstrom from her 1991 article and Camus in 2010 discusses that all these stereotypes are amplified for Black student athletes. Camus' work focuses more primarily on the racial difference in faculty perceptions of the Black student athlete. Discusses how racism has toxic effects on the student athlete's personal and academic development. He discussed that his review of literature showed very mixed reviews. He based his framework on the critical race theory. This was developed to address social justice and the waste of the judicial system, and how it was filled with inequalities among race. He broke his findings into 4 principles, and he got these from comments from the faculty. These areas range from 1, being impressed that Black athletes were successful despite the sports demands, 2, stating that they were colorblind and did not see this as a factor, 3, acknowledgement of success despite race, that they would have to work 2 times as hard to get the same results as fellow white student athletes. And 4, racially coded language, where faculty used language that was likely to be offensive to the student without them even realizing it. This alone could be a whole nother topic to be examined, but I think the main takeaway is that racism is still ever present in our day-to-day society here in the US. As I have stated previously, the physical and mental load carried by college athletes is already challenging enough, without adding the fact that we, as Black athletes, must outperform our white counterparts to even get the same treatment. We must hold ourselves to a higher standard whether we know it or not. We are constantly being judged. People have their minds made up about who we are even before we speak. We cannot slip up in the same way that white male athletes can. Second chances are not often ones available to us just based on the color of our skin. Many people believe that racism does not exist or is not as prevalent, but just because it is not as common for someone to blatantly say something racist to my face does not necessarily mean it's gone. Being interracial and my mom being white, she has heard what people have to say behind closed doors. She has often told me that you will be judged for being a 6'7" Black male athlete. They will never take you seriously until you make them. Racism has moved from face to face to behind the back. Just because they do not say it does not mean they do not think it. I could go into the endless comments made to me by walking into like a gym filled with predominantly white people and being called the N-word, the multiple times of comments made by primarily white fellow students that they felt were not offensive, the treatments of the non-campus police around CalU asking me what I was doing in the area when I was just trying to get food, but I will not. I just think that the greater acknowledgement is that of these potential issues would go a long way to better understanding. In conclusion, to combat the negative perceptions of student athletes and stereotypes based around athletes and Black athletes, we must work to improve communications between peers, faculty, and community. Education is the only way to change. People do not know what they do not know, and what they don't know scares them, and it causes them to think and act in a certain way. Engstrom stated that institutions need to give student athletes a platform to speak about the impact of their intense schedules, how they deal with juggling 2 major conflicting roles of the student and the athlete. He feels that the student athlete is the most effective communicator of these roles. Hopefully, these open communications can begin to change negative stereotypes and perceptions of student athletes that still persist in institutions of education, whether it's the staff, peers, or general public.